So the next presenter we have Aaron Geo.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Before I start, I just want to confirm that everybody can hear me. Perfect.
Yep, we can hear you.
I saw Mingde there. Hello. And can everybody see my screen? I'm sharing my screen right now. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, we do. Okay, perfect. I think there's a bit of a lag on my end. I've clicked present, but it's still being loaded for a while. Okay, sorry for the delay. Let me start. So hello, everybody. My name is Ariane, and this summer I've been conducting research on extracting key features from EEG data to assess the attention levels of students. My research is going to be structured around these 4 categories. First, I'm going to introduce my purpose. Then I'm going to outline my procedure of the research. I'm going to present the preliminary results of the research I have, and then I'm going to present with close with the impact as well as the further steps I'm going to take. First, my research is a bit of a combination between engineering education and data analytics. As we all know, in engineering education, attention is the key for learning experience. And how do we assess attention? With the development of neuroscience technologies, EEG, electroencephalograph data, has becoming more and more popular for researchers to use to assess the student attention as well as other types of brain activities, because they non-invasively reflect the brain activity of patients and participants. And the EEG data can be obtained using this 1020 international system with 8 electrodes placements. So the 10 and 20% originates from the 10 and 20% between adjacent electrodes around the scalp of the patient, and an illustration can be shown here. So my research addressed the gap in the previously existing research that there are diverging results showing emphasizing on different features, classifying between attention and inattention because of different experimental designs. So my research can be divided into these 4 basic steps: collecting baseline data, preprocessing the EEG data, extracting features from the data, and predicting and validating from the data. First, I have developed 2 sets of baseline activities: purely focused and purely unfocused. There are 4 types of attention: sustained attention, alternating attention, divided attention, and selective attention. While sustained attention is the type of attention we want to focus on because there's been research shown that is strongly correlated with what we do when we are paying attention in class. And the 4 types of baseline activities I've developed from there are focused meditation, mental math, which involves simple addition and simple subtraction, Sudoku, as well as watching educational short YouTube videos. The other 2 types of attention are opposing the sustained attention, and they are alternating attention and divided attention. And I've developed the multitasking baseline activity to reflect that. Selective attention isn't being particularly studied in this research. So I've developed an EEG preprocessing pipeline using EEG Lab. So first is to import the raw data, import the channel locations. In this case, we're using an off-the-shelf student-designed EEG headset of 8 electrodes. Then we apply the bandpass filter, channel selection, as well as rejecting EEG noise and human artifact using the ASR from EEG Lab. Some of the human artifacts include eye blinking and hand moving, and the noise can originate from the electrode disturbance. And this figure shown here is a picture illustrating how we eliminate those artifacts in the EEG data. So the next step is extracting EEG features. As we know, there are different brainwave features, mainly originating from the different bands of the frequencies. There are delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. And there are band frequencies, corresponding band frequencies are shown here. So how do we extract these features? Firstly, let me introduce the 5 main features I'm extracting. There are the 5 corresponding alpha, beta, theta, gamma, and delta energies. as well as the ratio from alpha to beta energy, as well as the alpha voltage and beta voltage. So the method that I extract this is by using the fast Fourier transform and computing the power density spectrum here. And by integrating across the frequency bands, we can get the corresponding band energies. And here is an illustration of the code that I used to extract these features. Next step is prediction. So analyzing on the baseline activity data we've collected. So after putting the data into the preprocessing outline, my code will output the feature vectors across time for each activity. I'll remove the first and last 30 seconds of the baseline activity because they are usually prone to noise as the participants is putting on and off and adjusting the headset to get used to it. Then I segment the data into 4 different periods, and by that way I can get more data. Then I eliminate the outliers based on the quartile method. Then I perform different statistical analysis, mainly computing the mean and the range of the data so that I can get what the focused average and unfocused average are. And lastly, I'm going to validate my data using 5 educational YouTube videos across different categories, different STEM categories in that way. And validation, as we know, is try to get a sense of whether our prediction is correct. So we have to have the correct answer. So how do we get the correct answer? We do that by labeling data with 2 methods. First is video rewinding. So when the participant is watching the particular YouTube video, we ask them to record their physical expressions while watching the video and letting the participant themselves, giving them an opportunity to label their data as focused or unfocused during certain periods of time that we've assigned. I've also developed a set of post-test questions across different videos and across different times so that by judging on the correctness of the question, we get a sense of whether the participant is focused or not during specific periods of time. And here are 2 sample validation results that we get. Up here is the channel 3 and 4 validation for the ratio between alpha and beta energy. And the line down here shows the unfocused average, and the line up here shows the focused average. And this line is where we get the real-time recording of the EEG data across different times for this particular video. And as we can show here, predominantly for these periods of times, the participants, by this prediction, has lower focus level, and up there, the participants have higher focus level. And here's another graph showing the channel 1 and 2 for alpha validation. The line down here is for focused average. The line up here is for unfocused average across these times. Here I'm going to show some of my preliminary results. So across the 8 main features that we've extracted, by analyzing them statistically, by eliminating outliers and getting the focused and unfocused average, we've concluded that there has been a significantly high alpha to beta energy ratio for focused activity than unfocused activity. That corresponds to a high alpha energy and a low beta energy. And here are 4 graphs that compare the ratio between alpha energy and beta energy across different focused activity versus the unfocused activity. And as we can see here, except for the mental math, all the other 2 types of focused activities have a significantly high level of RAB, the ratio between alpha and beta, while the other band energies, such as theta energy, proves to be insignificant as they provide indistinguishable results between focused activities and unfocused activities. So the impact of this research is on engineering education and understanding the attention. As we know, with the pandemic hitting us, we've been transitioning more and more into online learning. And with the increasing popularity and the necessity of online learning, it is vital for educators and instructors to understand the attention for their students. And my research, the result of this research after these further steps, could be developed into some sort of a GUI so that we can better understand whether the students or groups of students are focused during specific periods of time. And that way, the educator is able to determine whether their educational activities are effective or not. It'll also help research understand the essence of attention. And I'll address the limitations of my research as well. So this research is really preliminary so far. We've only have a really limited number of participants with a really small data set. And in the short term, I'm going to conduct the validation data collection and analysis, as well as extracting more features such as the approximate entropy, standard deviation, as well as the head position based on previous literature. So in the long run, I'm going to collect more baseline data with ethics approval from my department. I'm also planning to conduct machine learning algorithms such as a support vector machine to better classify. And lastly, as I mentioned, to develop a GUI for the video tagging platform to apply my results. And lastly, I really want to acknowledge this research project is supervised by Professor Scott Ramsey and Crystal Liu at the Department of Material Science and Engineering. It is also generously funded by the Division of Engineering Science and Professor Ramsey. Thank you so much for making this project possible. Thank you so much for listening, and here's my reference.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Gio, so questions, yes, from the judges?
Yeah, this is very interesting to me as an engineering educator. And in the research that you're doing, have you found any things that educators might be able to use right away in terms of increasing sustained attention in the classroom?
Definitely. I think my research firstly addresses on the question of how to determine whether you are focused or not during periods of time. And I think that's vital because instructors or lecturers, they tend to focus on different activities, for example, synchronous activities versus asynchronous, especially when we're moving with this pandemic, demonstrations versus labs, hands-on versus active learning versus passive learning. And hopefully my research with the findings I've got, hopefully there will be further understanding on how to determine whether groups of students are focused or not during periods of time, so that the educators have better feedback in that term of the effectiveness of their teaching. And I think that is mainly what my research is hoping to address.
Okay, good, thank you.
And thank you, Professor Tomlin, for your question.
Yeah, I'm also curious that because this is a target for engineering education, all the sources that you've been giving to your test subject, I understand that right now it's just a small. Are those very just a general STEM type of test, or this is a target for some specific engineering education related?
I think by engineering education, I think definitely you've raised a really good point. And I think the engineering education part of my research reflects in the 20 YouTube videos that I've selected. So as I've mentioned, they come from 5 different categories of STEM. So they originate from biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer programming, and those 5 different categories are being viewed by STEM participants. So the participants comes from actually the Division of Engineering Science. And we hopefully to address to try to assess the attention from these STEM students.
Okay, thank you.
And also from the baseline activities, mainly for example, they are solving math, so Sudoku, so there's a problem solving in math, as well as simple addition and subtraction. So there is a slight emphasis on the STEM side of the students, rather than conducting other activities such as linguistics or artistic studies.
Well, you're invited to observe my September online lectures to see how quickly I lose the students.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, that is an honor. It would be, and definitely, I believe my algorithm will classify your lecture as engaging.
I don't know about that, but thank you for
thank you so much, Mr. Liu, for your question.
Okay, thank you, judges, for your questions. I just wanted to remind everyone that there is a questions for presenters channel. So if you have the question, just make sure you link the presenter and then they can reply to your question. So we're going to move on to the next presenter. So the next person we have is Mingde Ying.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me and see my content?
Yep.
Awesome. Let's get started. Hello everyone, my name is Mingde, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Biscuit, or Biot-Savart calculation utility. This is the process of how I designed a software library to determine the magnetic field around a set of current carrying coils. And this software is actually being designed for an atomic physics experiment. So I'm a bit of an oddball. You're all here for AI, but I'm here talking to you about physics. Well, let's get started with this experiment. So in this talk, I'm going to be talking about the experiment that inspired the design of Biscuit, as well as how I implemented it. Okay, so in one sentence, the experiment aims to measure the 2s1/2 hyperfine interval in hydrogen. All right, what does this even mean? You came here for AI, not a physics talk. Here, I'll break it down. 2s1/2 refers to a set of electron energy states inside hydrogen, principally referring to the energy level n as well as the angular momentum j of the electron. And hyperfine means there's a third finer energy division, basically related to the alignment of the spin of the electron with the spin of the nucleus. Now, this is sort of like two bar magnets either being aligned or anti-aligned, and you can sort of imagine that in an aligned and anti-aligned states they'll either attract or repel each other, having different potential energies. This is directly basically the amount of energy that we want to measure. We want to measure the energy between the aligned and anti-aligned state of these two bar magnets. Now, why do we even want to measure this thing? Well, because of something called quantum electrodynamics. So quantum electrodynamics is a model that describes how matter interacts with light. It predicts the existence of a bunch of fundamental constants in our universe, but it doesn't actually give us the values. Instead, we as experimentalists need to go and measure these constants. Well, one of the things that quantum electrodynamics predicts is the hyperfine energies inside hydrogen. Now, there is a hyperfine interval inside the n equals 1 level that we know really well that we use in atomic clocks, but there's also one in the n equals 2 level that we're trying to find to better precision. And if we can more precisely measure this, then what we are doing is we are actually verifying quantum electrodynamics. And if we see any deviations from the accepted values, then that's going to be the key to new physics. Now, speaking of measuring stuff, we actually want to be able to make sure that what we're measuring is the correct energy separation and not something completely different. So on the left, you see what we actually want to measure, the 2s1/2 hyperfine interval. But what you see in the center is the same system, but with an added magnetic field. And what the magnetic field does is it actually splits the two energy levels further apart, sort of like a magnetic field actually pushing apart bar magnets. So this phenomenon is called the Zeeman effect, and this is every atomic physicist's worst enemy, because what this happens is this drastically ruins the accuracy of your experiment. And you only need a very tiny magnetic field to ruin your measurement. This magnetic field can come from the materials that our buildings are made of, which you'd think are neutral, or even the rails of the subways running through Toronto. Therefore, the motivation for making Biscuit, we need a way to counteract the Zeeman effect by building an apparatus to basically cancel out any external magnetic field. But if we're building an apparatus to do this, we need a way of simulating what the magnetic field looks like. Hence, Biscuit. Biscuit is part of the Zeeman correction project for this main atomic spectroscopy experiment. And now let's talk a bit more about Biscuit. The challenge really is to, within a 15 by 15 by 30 centimeter box, the space in which we do the experiment, given any shape of coil, sort of like in this cartoon, can we determine the magnetic field produced by it? Well, let's find out. Well, first, before we made Biscuit, we looked at the existing designs out in the market, and they weren't very good. So I'll tell you why. The first reason was there was some of the software that was very closed and inaccessible. So let me elaborate on this. This means that software is locked behind a bunch of licensing, a bunch of different languages, and it was really old. And the worst part of it is we couldn't really modify the code. It laid behind a black box that we couldn't change a single bit. So what do we do? We also looked for more open projects. We looked for the projects on GitHub. Now, these were really good because these were open source and modifiable. But the problem with these, they were kind of bad. They were kind of slow, under-optimized. So we wanted something that could do both. We wanted something that was both fast and versatile. Therefore, our requirements and metrics. We want something that had high calculation speed, accuracy, as well as adaptability so that we can adapt it for our experiment and also for the needs of any other atomic spectroscopy experiment or indeed anyone else working with magnetostatics. And of course, we need to be able to calculate this within our box at a resolution of 1 centimeter. Okay, so to test and validate Biscuit, we used a simple coil for testing. It's not really a coil, more a zigzag. But the reason we use this is because there's a very simple solution for this that we can compare to Biscuit for as a reference. Now, let's talk about the Biot-Savart law, the namesake of Biscuit itself. Now, this formula looks very scary, but in essence, the Biot-Savart law is a formula to calculate the magnetic field around a coil carrying some amount of current. Don't worry too much about the integral sign. I'll explain what this means. Let's get a picture of what it is. So if you picture a coil and we imagine we chop it up into very small, fine segments, and we associate every single fine, small segment with a small direction vector pointing a certain way with a certain length. We basically get one of those red vectors that you see on your screen right now. Then what we do is we basically look at some position on the coil with a position that we're observing our magnetic field from, and then we draw a blue position vector to that. And then for every single pair of red and blue vectors along all the chopped up pieces of coil, we get a very small magnetic field. And then we add all of them up. That's what integration means, to get the total magnetic field. Now, that might have been a bit complicated. Well, let's talk about the implementation into code. So I did a very similar method as what I just described using code. So the first thing I did is I would take a coil and chop it up into very fine pieces. So that test coil you see up there, I chopped it up into 30 pieces. And then what I did is I applied the Biot-Savart law to each one of them, to each segment of coil. Now remember, this is only to one point. We needed to measure the magnetic field in the entire box. So we have to repeat this 6,750 times for the entire volume of the box. This means we have to evaluate the Biot-Savart law over 200,000 times. That's a lot of times. And you wouldn't want to be doing this by hand. Let's talk about how we sped that up later. First, let's talk about the initial results. Using the initial version of Biscuit, we were able to get these nice contour plots of the magnetic fields. What you're looking at is you're basically looking up from above at Z equals 0, I think, looking at the magnetic fields produced by the coil. And as you can see, you can sort of see the shadow that the coil has in the magnetic fields, which is promising for us. Awesome. Now we wanted to make the code a bit faster. We wanted to optimize the code a tiny bit so that we would run faster and more accurately. Firstly, let's talk about speed. When Biscuit was first coded, I used pure Python to do it. Pure Python is kind of terrible for doing calculations, especially ones that require huge volumes of numbers. So this took 45 seconds. Now, 45 seconds isn't bad, right? But 45 seconds is still a long time to wait. You know, I could go to the bathroom in that time. But what I did is I added NumPy. NumPy uses fast vectorized libraries to basically make numerical calculations very, very fast. And this actually dropped computation time by a factor of 1,000 to 45 milliseconds. Amazing. But calculating things fast is not very useful if you don't calculate things accurately. So whenever we do numerical integration, realize that it's basically just a bunch of finite width rectangles when you do it numerically. And the narrower we make these rectangles, the more closer we make the estimated area to the actual area. But we always have some amount of error compared to the actual integral that we don't really know because we don't know what the actual integral is. Okay. Well, one way that we can improve accuracy is by decreasing the step size, as I just said. But if we decrease the step size, we increase computation time, and we basically just throw away all the hard work we did optimizing the code. But is there a way that we can get more accuracy without using a smaller step size? Of course there is. Here's a technique called Richardson extrapolation, and this is basically the cream of Biscuit. Richardson extrapolation says even though we don't actually know the error of a single integration result, if we have two integration results at two different step sizes, what we can do is we can actually estimate the error by both of these step sizes if we know the relationship between these step sizes. So what that's saying is if we know the relationship between these two step sizes, we can intelligently add these two integration results using a weight to basically get a more accurate estimate of the integral. I can explain this more afterwards if we have time. Now, this costs around 1.5 times the computation time, but in return, it gives us amazing results. Now, speaking of results, we basically plotted the magnetic fields with a test model using Biscuit with and without Richardson extrapolation and compared it to a precise reference solution to basically get a deviation plot. That is basically the amount of deviation that Biscuit had with reference to the reference. That sounds goofy. We want something that's nice and zeroed out and basically all dark as our result. So first, let me show you what it looked like with the baseline code. Now, this is not very good, right? We see a lot of bumps and unevenness, particularly on the Y and Z plots. And the total error bound on this is on the order of 10 to the minus 5. Now, check out what happens when we add Richardson extrapolation. Boom, look at that. Look at the Y and Z plots. Look how smooth, look at how comparatively smooth that is. Everything is really nicely around 0, and we have a much lower error bound as well, 10 to the minus 7 now. So this is awesome because with an extra 1.5 times in computation time, we gain 10 to 20 times accuracy, which is phenomenal for us. Now let's talk about the impact that Biscuit has on everything. So firstly, what we use Biscuit for is to design the magnetic field correction coils for the spectroscopy experiment to correct the Zeeman effect. Now, the goal of these coils is basically to have large and smooth regions of magnetic fields. And as you can see in the contour plots here, those large dark regions that you see in the plots correspond to the smooth magnetic fields, meaning that we can adjust the entire magnetic field throughout the entire volume of the experiment very evenly. This is great. That means if we're able to get this experiment done well, we will have a better measurement of the 2s hyperfine interval in hydrogen and be on our way to helping contribute to quantum electrodynamics. Now, Biscuit isn't just about atomic physics. It isn't just about spectroscopy even. It's about everything that deals with magnetostatics. So this can be applied to stuff like medical MRIs, transportation using magnetic levitation, or even clean energy using nuclear fusion. As an example, ITER's nuclear fusion reactor that's coming up in the next decade or two, and it uses a bunch of magnetic coils to model its magnetic field. So I whipped up a quick mock-up of this using Biscuit. And as you can see in the top of BX plot, you sort of see the same shape of magnetic field that you saw in this previous picture. And I think this is really the kicker of Biscuit. Biscuit really gives you insight into the magnetic field produced by any arbitrarily shaped coil. And it helps people get an intuition for what their design looks like before they have to go and do hard calculations by hand. The purpose of scientific computing, as Richard Hamming says, is insight, not numbers. And I hope Biscuit can help you give insight. Thank you very much for listening. The code is all available publicly on GitHub, and I'd be happy to take your questions now or afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Judges, can you please ask your questions?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go
I'll
ahead.
start.
Good, Hugh, you go.
Sure. All right. Thank you. So Mingde, definitely share your passion of presenting your research work here. And so it seems to be that you came up with this magic solution, something that you can dramatically reduce the time without sacrificing the accuracy. And with a very limited time, the time, I'm not sure I fully grasp the concept of this cream or the secret behind it. But it seems to me there was some special structure that allow that will get you to calculating the errors and so share that structure. So my question is that is this a special feature, is a special to the electromagnetic field application, or this is something more general that through your discovery?
Absolutely. So Richardson extrapolation is something that's not limited to just to electromagnetics and not even to numerical integration. Richardson extrapolation is actually a technique that we can apply to any sort of sequence. The idea behind Richardson extrapolation is that through any estimation of a sequence that has to go to infinity, you basically will have some sort of associated error. And whenever you have this error, the error is actually a power series. And what happens is, because power series have linear terms, right? What we can actually do is, given two results, we can just use the linear terms and cancel out the first order terms. So that basically means we delegate our error basically to the next order higher up. So that is what helps us reduce our error. So that's really the magic of Richardson extrapolation. It's nothing more than knowing how to work with power series.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And question on my side is how novel is the Richardson extrapolation? Is it being used in different fields now? What's the kind of the state of the art?
Yeah, actually, Richardson extrapolation has been in use since like the 1970s when it was conceived. Like, this is something that's Richardson extrapolation itself is definitely not new, but this is sort of the first example that I've seen it being used specifically for calculation of magnetic fields. So there are a couple of other examples of other libraries that exist out there to calculate magnetic fields, namely, I'm going to look up here, Radia and Biosaw. Now, both of these use their own techniques of basically getting better estimates of the integration, but what they use is they basically, instead of having to do stuff numerically, they basically turn coils into approximate analytical shapes, so like rectangles and circles. So this is basically a way of allowing us to preserve the numericalness, if you will, of the integration, allowing us to keep these very weird shapes without having to just resort to small rectangles or circles.
Right, thank you.